Hey, vinyl community, Jeff here, and I just wanted to jump on a thread real quick. I've noticed some people were doing some responses to this. This is for JC at Flipside. Everybody knows JC, right? So a couple days ago, he did a thread on lost gems of the 90s, basically. I have a link below. You can check his video out to see the idea. He showed an album that, yeah, I'd never heard of. I've seen Aaron done some ones, but anyway, and Steve from All the World of Stage mentioned a band that definitely would have been on my list that I'll leave off just because he did it. Heavy Bones. When I discovered them a handful of years ago, you know, they're from the 90s, but anyway, I didn't discover them until maybe 10, 15 years ago. And I was like, oh my gosh. Anyway, Lost Gems. I won't go there. You can see some of their videos. Just look for them. There are some great things out there. I went ahead and grabbed three. I want to cover three. One of them I'm kind of doing, well, not as a joke. It's a great band, but I'll tell you when I get there. But I would absolutely say a band that I think does not get enough recognition. A handful of people know them. I have mentioned them quite often. Anyway, one of my favorite bands from the 90s, for sure. Their first album, 91, I believe, this first album, the Galactic Cowboys. I mean, it's just, I mentioned them just recently in a video. This album in particular, I think the next couple albums were equally great. This is by far, in my opinion, one. Maybe it's just because I listened to it so much. It captivated me so much that I, just absolutely love this album. But all of their stuff is good in its own way. Melodies, harmonies, the heaviness, the funkiness, the complexity of some of the songs. That they just had it all. If you haven't heard this album, at least go check it out. I'd love to see these get reissued. This is an import on vinyl that, kind of comes in a lighter weight sleeve. But check them out. It's just some great stuff. They've done quite a few albums. They came back and did a reunion album in the past 4 or 5 years. That was just great too. Texas-based band. They were along the lines of the King's X because they had the same type producer. They were in the same circles. Actually, they did some music with King's X on the Faith, Hope, Love album. They were part of a song there. So part of that whole, they've worked together and they've hang in the same circles. So they kind of go hand in hand, but they don't really sound like King's X, but they just kind of have that sludgy, hard rockin' feel at times, funky, great stuff. Yeah, so that's going to be my number one pick. But then I realized, right along the same line, Steve mentioned Heavy Bones. Frankie Banali, it's like an all-star band, kind of had Frankie Banali, some other people. Well, a couple years after that album came out, Frankie, there was still some Quiet Riot action in that years, but I don't think they were quite as active. They did some great albums in the 90s, I think, the Quiet Riot 90s years when Kevin DeBroke came back. But in 95, Frankie had hooked up with Bob Kulick and Chuck Wright from Quiet Riot and Graham Bonnet, who I have to admit I was never much of a fan of back in the days. I didn't really like his work as much with Rainbow. I didn't really like his work with Impellitteri. Wasn't a huge fan of his Michael Schenker album. I don't know what it was back in the day that I had against him, but I will say in revisiting him, decades later, I was wrong. And I heard this album, and I'm thinking he sounds familiar, the singer, but anyway, I'm like, that's Graham Bonnet. A Lost Gem, Graham Bonnet, Chuck Wright, Bob Kulick, Frankie Banali. It's just an all-star great album. When I first heard this, I'm like, wow. I didn't hear it until many years later. They just reissued it on vinyl in 2021, so I had to grab a copy of that because I'm just like, wow, that's such a great album. So if you haven't heard this, check it out. It's the only, one and done. Well, no, I take that back. There's not one done. Graham did this one and done for this lineup. I think Graham did continue with a different lineup, and they did put out some material after this. But to me, this is the classic release. And like I say, it was just reissued on vinyl. So if you're a vinyl collector, you might get a chance to get that. This one, I'm throwing it in here. It's a great album. It's definitely on my list. But I want to do this quickly. See, Aaron Muta Alamere has done 3 videos, one band per video. And I'm sure that this band is going to be he's going to do some more, and I bet you this is going to come up. So I'm jumping on board and doing the Four Horsemen. Now, like I say, it's kind of a joke because Aaron introduced me to this band a couple years ago. he was doing his Tipsy Tuesday, and this was playing in the background, and I'm just like, what the heck? They remind me a lot vocally of like Helix, so they had that 80s vibe, but then they had this gritty guitar, and I'm like, I'm just perplexed because I'm listening to this music, and I'm like, what is this band? And so finally he talked about it, and I'm like, I've never heard of the Four Horsemen. And he sent me a copy of this on CD, and then I immediately found out, I guess he sent the CD to me because they did reissue the vinyl, you know, around that same year, which was just a couple years ago, and I jumped all over it. And then I turned it on to a friend of mine, because there's a local band that plays in this area a lot called the Four Horsemen. They're a Metallica tribute band. Makes sense, right? And so a friend of mine, one of my former bandmates, said he's going to see the Four Horsemen. I'm like, what? The Four Horsemen? They're coming to town? What? And then when because I had no clue about the Metallica tribute band, and then he said, he said, no, it's the Metallica tribute band. And I'm like, oh, I thought it was this band. And I sent him a video, and he's like, holy crud, dude. And he said he went right out and ordered a copy of this album. He says he was blown away. So anyway, check him out. Gritty, at times bluesy, heavy. Like I said, the vocalist reminds me a lot of Helix, kind of that gritty approach, but just overall a solid record. This is a great release. There's more than one version of this, I guess. This is a deluxe edition, and it has some bonus tracks on a second album. So you get the full album, and then you get this EP of additional tracks that were recorded at a different time. But yeah, I wanted to throw that in only because not only is it a great album, but Aaron turned me on to that, and I know he's going to end up doing a video on it, I'm sure. Because, I mean, he ranted and raved about that. I'm not sure where his list is going, because he has a lot of great bands like that I was unaware of. I really zoned out in the 90s. I turned my head to Euro metal. I turned my eyes towards bands that were still in the melodic metal field. And so, sadly, a lot of I don't really like the grunge or alternative stuff, but there were a lot of other bands that I think I just kind of ignored and lumped into that because I thought they were of that nature, and I did not listen to them. So I missed a lot. Returning to that now, and I'm finding out a lot of stuff that I totally missed out on thanks to all the other great people in the VC. That's it for this one, though. Thanks a lot for watching. Jump on the thread. Show us what you loved from the 90s, and we'll see you later. Rock on and rock hard.